For session, please press star 1 on your touch-tone phone. Today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Shannon McGarry. Ma'am, you may begin.
Great. Thanks so much, Amy. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar for Vistas. I'm Shannon McGarry, and I'll be the host of today's session on mining census data to explore poverty in your community. Quantitative data can really help you sharpen your understanding of community problems and can help inform the strategic solutions that you're going to be using to build community in the areas that you guys are working. And census data is a great resource to provide insights into poverty and life in your community. So during today's presentation, you will have an opportunity to glean an insider's look at the census data and learn how you can use the data to inform the work as a VISTA. I want to direct you to the lower right-hand corner of your screen. You'll notice that there's a poll, and we're just asking you to answer a couple of questions, which will help us to know a little bit more about who's participating today and help us to direct the session to your needs. Today we're joined by Nesreen Kashan, who's the Data Dissemination Specialist at the U.S. Census Bureau, and she will be leading us through this exciting look at census data. Also joining us today, we have Robin Stegman and Sharon Robb, both of who are project specialists at Campaign Consultation. You'll find Robin in the chat and Q&A feature. She's going to be answering your questions, asking for your advice and input, and also providing you with some additional resources on today's topic. Sharon is helping us with the technical assistance, and I'm going to turn it over to her so she can share a few tips and suggestions to help you fully engage in today's presentation.
Hello, everyone. So if you have questions for today's presenter, you may submit them by clicking on the Q&A bar, and we will get to them during the presentation. Your phone lines are muted right now, but we will open them at the end of the session to ask your questions over the phone. If you wish to share tips and ideas and resources, you can share those in the chat section, which is also on the right. We will keep the conversation going for 30 minutes after the conclusion of the presentation to make sure that we answer additional questions as much as we can. If we have too many, we will find another way to get responses to you. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on Webinars for Vista page of the campus in about 2 weeks.
Great, thanks, Sharon. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kim Judy, who's a training specialist at AmeriCorps Vista, and she's going to share some ways, talk to you a little bit more about investing in your professional development.
Hello, and welcome on behalf of the AmeriCorps Vista program. I do welcome you to today's webinar. We create these webinars with our AmeriCorps Vistas in mind. Our goal is to equip you with the learning resources and information you need to be successful in your year of service. We also call on you to invest in your own professional development. So hopefully you've already started a professional development plan for yourself and have set goals for what you want to develop this year. If you haven't, please start setting aside 30 minutes a week for reading, research, learning on the Vista campus, or other sites. We do offer regular opportunities to participate in webinars that focus on your life as it relates to Vista, and on webinars that focus on your Vista service, like this one. And so I encourage you to start looking ahead throughout your year of service and picking up on some of the webinars that may help you be more successful not only at your site, but in your future goals. I look forward to your questions that you have throughout this session. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Kim. Now I'm going to take a few minutes and walk us through today's agenda. So the first thing that we are going to be talking about is how the Census Bureau measures poverty. So what those poverty thresholds are and how that's calculated. Then we'll be going over the 2010 census and the American Community Survey so that you can see what the differences are between those two things and also how they relate. And then we're going to really dive in and take a look at the data and how it can help you to glean some insight into poverty at the community level and at some of the different other different levels. Finally, we'll give you an opportunity to go over a couple of demonstrations so that we can get our hands dirty and do a few exercises so that you can give it a whirl. And then we're going to give you the opportunity and some tips on how you can build your community profile to help inform your work. And then finally, we will be doing some evaluations so that your feedback is always really helpful to see how we can improve these sessions in the future. And I'm going to touch base quickly with Sharon before I turn it over to Nesreen to see if the results of our poll are ready.
They are. Nesreen, with first questions, are you new to accessing the census data? And 82 out of 171, or 40%, are, and 56 are not familiar with it, which is about 30%. And in the question is, do you know what the poverty rates are for your community? 54, or about 30%, answered yes, and 40% answered no. And do you know how to access information for poverty rates in your community and how to use it for your source? About 10% said yes, about 20% said no, and about 30% were unsure.
Great, thanks, Sharon. So it looks like there's going to be a lot of opportunity to provide some deeper information and help get more of those no's and unsures to yeses today. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nesreen.
Great, thank you, Shannon. Good afternoon, everyone. I always begin these presentations with the mission statement of the agency. The Census Bureau serves as the leading source of quality data about the nation's people and economy, and we honor privacy, protect confidentiality, and share our expertise globally, and we conduct our work openly. So, the mission statement, of course, is fundamental to our agency's identity. But also, I like to start with it because when you're accessing the data, you're going to discover at times that you won't be able to get certain data sets hereafter. And it all comes back to the agency's pledge to honor privacy and protect confidentiality of all our respondents. If the agency believes that releasing certain data could possibly breach our confidentiality laws by identifying the identities of the respondents, then they will not be released. You will not get, if you are not able to get the data you want, it's because the agency very often has made a conscious decision not to release it. Now I want to talk to you about how the official poverty measure is arrived at. The Census Bureau uses a set of money income thresholds that vary by family size and composition to determine who is in poverty. If a family's total income is less than the family's threshold, then that family and every individual in it is considered in poverty. Official poverty thresholds don't vary geographically, but they are updated for inflation using the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So income used to compute poverty status includes earnings, unemployment compensation, workers' comp, Social Security, supplemental security income, SSI, public assistance, veterans payments, survivor benefits, pension or retirement income, interest, dividends, rent, royalties, income from estates, trusts, educational assistance, alimony, child support, and assistance from outside the household. But it does not include non-cash benefits such as food stamps and housing subsidies. And the threshold is computed before taxes, and it excludes capital gains or losses. It's important to note that if a person lives with a family, you're to add the income of all family members. Non-relatives in that household, such as a housemate, a boarder, etc., would not count. And I mentioned non-cash benefits, and SNAP would be included. That does not count, but it's worth noting that the Census Bureau separately asks about SNAP participation, so we still do capture that indicator, and that is among the data sets you'll be able to access. So here you're looking at the 2012 poverty thresholds by size of family and number of related children under 18. The way you want to read it is by looking at each row and then the columns to see the family size. How many of the householders are children under 18, etc. So if you look at this highlighted section, you first in this column with the none column, you see 3 people with no children bringing in as a family almost $18,000. At that poverty threshold, that they would be in poverty by this official definition. And then in this next column, with 1 child, it goes up to $18,500. So, of course, the way you would look at this is 2 people are adults now in this column, and 1 is a child. And then here in this column 2, it would be 2 children, same value, same income, $18,500, but 2 are children and 1 is an adult, and so on. And I included the link below if you wanted to explore this on your own or download the Excel file that I derived this from. So now I'm going to review the differences between the 2010 census and the American Community Survey so that you're aware of the programs behind the data you're accessing. So this slide represents the data that you can obtain from the program, the 2010 census. These are basic demographic and housing characteristics only. So you can get the population in 2010, age, race, Hispanic or Latino origin. Households and families simply means the relationships of householders to one another. Housing occupancy and tenure simply means owned or rented. I just want to take you back to the race and Hispanic or Latino origin because parenthetically it says disaggregated. And what that means for Asian is that when we ask if you're Asian, do you have an opportunity to tell us if you're Filipino or Chinese or Korean or Afghani or whatever the case may be. And similarly with Hispanics, you can tell us if you're Puerto Rican or Cuban or Mexican or Dominican and so on. Although these are the only characteristics, you can cross-tabulate some of them. For instance, getting tenure by the major race categories or Hispanic origin. So there are several other possible tables that you can obtain besides the 6 or 7 bullets here. So these are the 2010 census data products. Table types and data products are important because each table has its own strength. You have available to you a download today. It's a one-pager that explains different types of data products. Look for these prefixes, the DP or the QT, when you're accessing your data, and familiarize yourselves with them. Your downloadable one-pager will give you that quick summary. So you'll know, for instance, that if you want general data, you should go to the DP or the QTs in the case of 2010 census data. And if you want more detailed, or if you want to compare across geographies, you'll know you'll need the H. You'll have to look for H's or GCTs. So now I want to let you know about American Community Survey, which is going to be, in the vast majority of cases, where you'll go for your data. The American Community Survey is a nationwide survey that collects essentially the same information on people and housing that was collected on the long-form questionnaire back in 2000. So back in 2000, we sent out 2 different forms, the long form, as it was then known, which went to 1 in 7 households, and what was then called the short form. In 2010, that did not happen. We had one uniform form that asked about 8 to 10 questions. Our slogan was 10 questions in 10 minutes. Starting in 2005, we began the American Community Survey, which went out to and continues to go out to 3.5 million addresses every single year across our nation. It's a continuous survey, so each month a sample of housing unit addresses receive the questionnaire representing every county in the nation. Again, it has been in operation since 2005, and it provides detailed population and housing characteristics every single year. There are 69 different questions asked on the American Community Survey, and I would encourage you to look at a sample form on the census.gov website. When you include the option to cross-tabulate these, we have many cross-tabulated tables. There are hundreds of different types of characteristics that you can derive about your community. So the major categories for these characteristics are demographics, social, economic, and housing. The demographic characteristics slide should look familiar to you because this is essentially what we asked in the 2010 census. But in the case of ACS, we also collect this data and we release it every single year. So you can get sex and age and race and Hispanic or Latino origin. And again, our Asians and our Hispanic and Latinos are disaggregated. The social characteristics you can obtain from the ACS include education, meaning school enrollment and educational attainment level, marital status, fertility, grandparent caregivers, veterans and disability status, place of birth, citizenship, year of entry, languages spoken at home, including how well you can speak English, ancestry, and tribal affiliation. Now, I gave you a couple of ancestry in this final bullet examples simply because when I introduced to you the major race categories, I explained that the Asians and the Hispanics are disaggregated there. The American Community Survey also asks respondents to write in their ancestry. And so this is where if you're looking for information about whites or blacks who may want to write in their ancestry, you would get it. So for instance, in the whites, it would be your Germans or people who might want to write their French origin, or Middle Easterners are captured here, Iranians and Egyptians and so on. And for blacks, that would be your sub-Saharan Africans, such as your Eritreans or Nigerians or Ethiopians, etc. So where I am in the D.C. metro area, we happen to have a lot of sub-Saharan Africans, and depending on what kind of outreach you conduct, that may be important for you to know. So here are the economic characteristics. And this is where you'll get the poverty data. Here it includes income, benefits, poverty status, employment status, occupation, industry, commute to work, which includes how you get to work and how long it takes, and place of work. This is also under benefits where you'll get the SNAP participation rates. So if you'll recall, SNAP is not included as part of that basket of income to determine poverty levels, but you can look at that characteristic separately. So finally, we have our housing characteristics. Tenure, again, whether you own or rent, which you can get from the 2010 census, occupancy and structure type, housing value, taxes and insurance, utilities, and mortgage and monthly rent. Housing characteristics could be beneficial to you, particularly if you want to determine what percentage of households in your community spend more than 30 or 35% of their gross incomes on rent or mortgages. Those are called, there's two different indicators there under this last bullet: selected monthly ownership cost as a percentage of household income, and the GRAPI, gross rent, as a percentage of household income. So you may want to look at poverty rates in your community, but you may also want to look at what other households who may not meet the official poverty definition but may still be feeling financial distress, how many households like that are in your community. And this indicator may very well help you find that out. So what you're looking at here is population thresholds and release schedule for the American Community Survey. As I mentioned to you, it's an annual survey. Data are collected and released annually. They're released according to population size thresholds. I'll start at the bottom. For 5-year estimates, for all communities that are smaller than 20,000 people, you can only get 5-year estimates. What that means for you is if you want to know what's going on in your neighborhood, and the Census Bureau, you'll be able to do that through a geography called the Census Tract, which is between 3,000 and 7,000 people. You will only be able to get a 5-year estimate for your community, for your neighborhood, or if you choose your zip code. For areas that are larger than 20,000 but don't quite reach 65, you can get a 3-year estimate. So this is going to include some of your smaller townships and even some of your smaller counties for those of you who may be working in rural areas. If you are eligible geographically because of population size for a 3-year estimate, you'll also have a 5-year estimate available to you. And finally, we have our 1-year estimates. Many of our counties, certainly every one of our states, will have a 1-year estimate available for it, and so will our larger cities. And similarly, if you're a 1-year estimate, if you're the highest on this pecking order, you're going to be able to get a 3- and a 5-year estimate. So why would you want to do that? Why would you care to get a 5-year estimate when you're a city or a county of 1 million people and you can get a 1-year estimate? Let's say you want to compare what's going on. You want to compare poverty in your neighborhood with poverty in your city, and your city's about 1 million in size. You have to have a similar, you have to be comparing apples with apples, essentially. So you'll need to use a 5-year estimate for your neighborhood, the only option available to you, and compare it with the 5-year estimate for your very large city so that you're making an accurate and true comparison. So that's why these larger estimates will have the other estimates available. Now, the other component of this table is that it shows you the release schedule. Data are released annually, and they're released every fall, every October, November, and December. So last year, we released the 2011 data set, the 1-year estimate in October. In November, we released the 09 to 11, and in December, we released the 5-year, 07 to 2011. And you can go back in the system and get these previous data sets up to 06. So now we're back to the notion of data product types, but this time for a much more robust American Community Survey. Again, refer to your one-page handout to understand the various strengths of each of these table product types. Your DPs, what you're looking at here, are identified in this slide, and they correspond to the slides I just showed you. So here's your DP02 for the social characteristics slide, your 03 for economic, your 04 for housing, and your 05 for demographic. When you conduct a search using our data access tool, the American FactFinder, the system will return tables to you ranked from general to specific. And the DPs, these right here, will almost always come up first. And they're often all that you're going to need. So to get a quick overview of your community's educational attainment or poverty level, educational attainment, you go to the 02, and poverty, you go to the 03. We'll do a couple of exercises later where I'll show you the strength and the value of selecting a GCT table or a comparison profile table. And they're both great, respectively, for geographic or chronological overviews, but Otherwise, but you have to make a conscious choice to select these tables to derive their strength, and that'll make a little more sense when we're in demo mode. So what you're looking at here are the census geographies. It's slightly offline, but most of these are self-explanatory. Of course, you could always get data for the nation, and your region would be a metropolitan statistical area. So here around where I am, the DC metro region, and we have the nearby Baltimore metro region. You may also have a micropolitan statistical area in your community, depending on its size. That may be useful to get data at that geography. Divisions are political subdivisions, and you probably won't need them. States are self-explanatory, and so are counties. Places are a term that is a term that's distinct to the Census Bureau. So places include municipalities, incorporated places, townships, cities, etc. But they also include areas in your community that are not incorporated but are recognized entities in your community. And of course I can't know all of them in your respective areas, but the Census Bureau calls them CDPs, Census Designated Places. And one important point about CDPs is they can often cross counties. They are often not confined to one county. So we have a lot of CDPs around where I am: Silver Spring, Upper Marlboro, Bethesda, in Maryland, and Tyson's Corner, and Annandale, in nearby Virginia. And I think it'll be useful for you to become familiar with the CDPs in your areas, should you choose to get data at that level of geography. But just remember, whether it's incorporated or not, the Census Bureau calls it a place. Now, census tract and also zip codes, which is partially covered by this circle, are the neighborhood level geographies when you're after that community level granular look of what's going on in your community. So census tracts, as I mentioned, are geographies of 3,000 to 5,000 in size, and zip codes obviously will have greater variances because they're not based on population thresholds. But the advantage, of course, is you may have a better sense of what the zip code looks like in your community than a census tract. But when we get into exercises, I'll show you some strategies for becoming familiar with the census tracts near you. So the American Community Survey, it is a survey, as its name states, and accordingly it comes with margins of error. And I just want you to be aware of them and talk to you a little bit about how to ascertain what your MOEs are, your margins of error. A margin of error is the difference between an estimate and its upper or lower confidence bounds. Confidence bounds can be created by adding the margin of error to the estimate for the upper bound and then subtracting the margin of error from the estimate for the lower bound. When you get that range, what the Census Bureau is telling you is that it is 90% certain that that range is accurate. So all data from the American Community Survey contains margins of error. Some data tables will publish them, but not all of them will. And again, to obtain your MOE, add or subtract the margin of error from your estimate to get your margin of error range. And this really becomes important when you're comparing two or more communities, because computing your margins of error are going to tell you whether your conclusion is accurate. If you want to say one community is experiencing poverty at a higher rate than another, you should make sure by computing the MOE ranges that you're absolutely certain about that. So what would that look like? In this table from the American FactFinder, this is an American Community Survey table, we're looking at census tract, two census tract data tables, one in the District of Columbia, the other in a nearby county. And the indicator is, so these are neighborhoods, 2 different neighborhoods. And we're looking at male Hispanics who are foreign born. In one community, we have 355 males who are Hispanic and foreign born. In the other, Census Tract 7038 in Montgomery County, it's very hard to see, but it's 315. And the MOE ranges are, the margin of error ranges are in the column beside them. And you'll see the plus or minus. So in this case, it's plus or minus 158. And in the Montgomery County case, it's plus or minus 200. So what does that mean? Excuse me a moment. So is the number of Hispanic males higher in one of these tracts? These numbers are estimates and they're based on samples. And there are a lot of factors that determine how well a sample reflects the true makeup of the whole population, of how accurate the estimate is. But in general, the bigger the sample is, the more reliable it is. So if you look at your margin of error ranges for a county of 1 million people, you'll often see minuscule margin of error ranges because many people were sampled, and so it's therefore more reliable. But when you get down to this neighborhood level, such as this example, you may see larger margin of error ranges, and it's up to you to determine whether you're comfortable with the reliability or not. The margin of error ranges are there, but you're ultimately the judge. So the margin of error for these 2 estimates is pretty high. By taking the estimate plus or minus the margin of error, we can get a sense of the range. You can see that there's a lot of overlap for these 2 estimates. It's really apparent if we graph them side by side. So now consider the margin of error. Is the number of Hispanic males foreign born higher in one of these 2 census tracts? Because of the wide margin of error, we can't say that there's any difference between the 2. So before we get into actual demos, I just want to show you one particular way that you can begin to collect your data and conduct your community-level searches. When we go live to demo, I'm going to show you how to use the American FactFinder data access tool to input an address in your community to obtain that neighborhood-level data at the census tract level. So in this example, I typed in the address for the LA Regional Office of the Census Bureau. From the earlier slide, remember that census tracts have population thresholds of about 3,000 to 7,000 people. And also remember that the ACS tables are all released according to population thresholds. So the tract level data only has 5-year estimates. If you want to compare, again, this is the same point I made earlier, your neighborhood with your city or your county or even your state, you have to use 5-year estimates for all those larger geographies because you're creating a nesting comparison, and the smallest geography in your nested comparison only has a 5-year estimate available for it. So just remember that that's going to be necessary, even though those larger geographies will also have certainly 3-year and in many cases 1-year estimates available for them. So I took that geography, that census tract neighborhood geography that we saw in that previous slide, and I looked at the poverty rate in that census tract, and I added a couple of other geographies. I added the LA metro region, Los Angeles County, and even the zip code that census tract is located in. So all these geographies are all nested together. We would have to take a closer look at the margins of error to be sure, But on its face, in both cases, whether it's all families or with related children under 18, during that 5-year period, it's important to note that we're looking at a 5-year period, the census tract poverty rates are considerably higher than any of the other geographies that are nested within it. So now that you're aware of the data available and how to evaluate them properly, let's get into your data access tool. It's called the American FactFinder, and it has 3 components. It has community facts, guided search, and advanced search. We're going to look at screenshots for the first 2 because you'll see when you're trying them out, and I encourage you to do that they're pretty intuitive and user-friendly. Advanced search is the most comprehensive tool, but it's also the one that can be most challenging to use without a little bit of instruction. So we're going to be conducting the demos and your exercises in that mode so that you're well prepared. Sort of like learning to drive a stick before you drive an automatic. So here's community facts, and as the screenshot shows you, it instructs you to enter a state, county, city, town, or zip code in the search box, and you do, and there's a smart search capability linked to it. So it's already anticipating what geography I'm after, so I could even click on one of the ones that it presents for me, and then I just simply click Go. And when I do that, I get all these topics, and I can tab through them: population, age, business and industry, education, housing, income, origins, and language. Now, these are select statistics, certainly not comprehensive, but you'll see a lot of blue text, and anything blue is hyperlinked. So when you click on any of these blue links, it shortcuts you over to the Advanced American FactFinder so that you're in the advanced tool without really knowing how to use it. And that could be advantageous if you've never attended this session or you just want to get quick data in and out, but you'll only be able to get 5-year estimates as a default for all the data sets. So it really pays to have the full control of the American FactFinder system, but still Quick Facts could be a useful tool for you. Guided search, as its name suggests, guides you step by step to the data you're looking for. You just simply start by clicking Get Me Started, and you continue to follow the instructions. So here you would start, you most likely are going to start by saying, I'm looking for information about people or housing, but even more likely people will be what you're after. And then you click, once you select one of these radio dials, you click Next, and then it takes you through these numbered sections: topics, geographies, race and ethnic groups, and search results. Now with race and ethnic groups, you may not even need to stop there. You may want the poverty level for your entire community, and it doesn't matter to you if they're white or black or Hispanic. So if it doesn't matter to you, then just go over to, or let me put it differently, in this particular search, you don't want to get that indicator and cross-tab it. Simply skip number 4 and go right to number 5, and you'll get your search results. And you'll get the top 10 tables that the system thinks you're most interested in, but it's not advanced search, so it's not every table available to you. But the good news is you'll have the option to go into advanced search via a hyperlink that will take you into advanced search without really knowing how to use it again. So, but even that is not as comprehensive as just going into advanced search directly. This is a screenshot showing you guided search if you stopped over at number 4 and chose to identify a race or an ethnic group. There's a couple different ways you can do it. You can simply type, in this case, I don't just want Asian, I want Vietnamese, and again it anticipates. I started typing Vietnamese and it asks me Vietnamese alone, here's one code, or Vietnamese alone or in combination. So a Vietnamese who's multi-ethnic or biracial, for instance. And you simply click Go. Your selection would come up here, and you would need to make sure it ends up in this basket. And then you go on to search results. Or you can use these tables here and select the major race groups, white alone, white in combination, black alone, and so on. And you would ensure that whatever blue hyperlink you selected ended up in your selections. And then you would continue. You would hit the next box and get your search results. But advanced search is going to be, as I mentioned, the most comprehensive. So this is where we'll spend the rest of the afternoon. So what you have here are several ways to get started in advanced search. If you know you just want the poverty rate for your county, so I simply type, you can stop by at number 1 here and type poverty as topic, and you can write your county, Montgomery County, MD, Maryland. And it will bring up a table that is going to give you that. Now, if you want something a little more detailed, if you want that granular level data, stopping in at number 1 is not going to suffice. You're going to have to go over to topics, geographies, and race and ethnic groups. You won't be using this as just slightly off sync industry codes or EEO codes. So these top 3 are the ones you'll need. I'm going to show you how these filters look live, and then we're going to conduct some exercises. So let me go ahead and switch over to live view. Let's see. Click what the best way to do that. I'm sharing my desktop with you. And just a word, you have this tray available to you. If you have questions, you can continue to engage with the chat. And also, here on your far right, there's a Q&A option on your tray. So, and then you can simply hide that tray if you find it too distracting. So I'm going to start at census.gov, and to get to the American FactFinder, you simply go to the Data tab, and your second option is American FactFinder. So here we have our same smiling girl, and we're going right into advanced search. And we're going to just say, show me all, because again, this is the most comprehensive search tool among these 3. So here again are the topic, geographies, and race and ethnic group tabs. You're going to spend most of your time in geographies and topics, but I'm going to show you one exercise today where you'll need race and ethnic group tabs as well. So geographies works by telling it what type of geography you're after. Before you type a name, is it a county? Is it a city? Is it a census tract? So you tell it that first. County, is it a state? Is it a place? And when you think of place, it's the unique definition that I gave you for place. And is it a zip code? Now, at the Census Bureau, if you want a zip code for households, which all of you do, you need to use this top one. It's called the zip code tabulation area, not the bottom one, the zip code. It's just, I wouldn't worry about why. It just sort of is what it is, and it'll help you from getting a error when you conduct your searches. And then here are your metropolitan statistical areas. I gave you that example of wanting to get a census tract by typing in an address. If you want to do that, you would simply hit the Address tab and type in an address here. So I would simply type in an address, and it has to be a valid street address. It can't just be a street. And you don't always need a zip code. But once you do that, what's great about doing that is none of us intuitively know what a census tract looks like in our neighborhood and what our census tract is bound by. So you can move over to the Map tab, and it'll create a map showing you the census tract. It can take a little while to load as you're experiencing here, and sometimes it may not even load, as I think might be going on here. Sometimes I hit reload and see if that works. I think it cleared my address tab. So try it again. Okay, and I apologize for that. Right now it doesn't seem to be loading. But going back to the address tab, what this is telling you once you've done this is that for that address, this is again that nesting model I started illustrating for you. I can get data by the census tract. I can get it by the county, which in this case DC is both a county, identified as a county and a state, and I can get it by my metropolitan statistical area. And I could select all of these at once and throw them into this basket and get that nesting example I started off showing you. So that's what you would do if you want a specific address and you want to nest geographies for that specific address down to the census tract level. Now, if you just, again, want a geographic type and you know what it is intuitively, you simply start with that, and then you select your your state. And then it'll populate with all the counties in your state, and you can select all of them, or you can hold down the control key and then just select the ones you want, and then hit add to your selections. And you can do that with all these geographic types. So I'm going to clear all these selections. So this basket is very important to keep your eye on because your search, I always tell people this system, you're a complex thinker, and this system, this filter system, is a binary thinker. So if you put too many things in the basket that don't make any sense to this binary system, it will come back with no search results at all. So the other tab in this filter system that you want to be aware of is the Topics tab. It's much more comprehensive. It has people and all the different ways that you can get indicators for people, including veteran status, poverty, which is where you get poverty levels, but also SNAP participation and heating and cooling assistance, employment, including benefits, education, including educational attainment and field of degree, disability status, including the type of disability and whether you have self-care limitations, and so on. So these are really great to explore. I'm going to collapse that and then open up housing. And this is where you get, I mentioned rent costs and mortgage costs. So this is where you would get those indicators. Rental statistics, owner costs and fees, gross rents. Remember I mentioned a GRAPI to you? So, and then owner costs and fees. So you can ascertain those burdens for your community. And there are other characteristics of housing as well. Business and industry you won't use, and governments not so much, but sometimes you just may want a shortcut and tell the system you want the most recent data available. As you can tell, these parentheses just mean the number of data sets that are available, and we don't have that much data for 2012 yet, so it says 7. So most often the most recent in this case will be 2011. And product type are those table types, that cheat sheet I gave you. And you may not want to always go into every single one of these topics, but if you know you want a comparison table or a geographic comparison table, start by telling it you want those product types. Otherwise, you may not need it. And again, program. I began by telling you about the difference between American Community Survey and 2010 Census. So here you can develop a finer search by telling it right away you only want American Community Survey data, or conversely, you only want 2010 census data, and that would be under decennial census. This particular system has both 2000 and 2010 census. And I won't get into data sets, but so those are the features in the topic and geographies tab. So let's look at the exercises available, the exercises we're going to do this afternoon. The first one is, let's take a look at poverty rates in Alameda, California. We're going to focus on all families, and we can explore how poverty rates change according to family composition and as well as over the years. The purpose of this exercise is to show you a comparison profile. So I mentioned the different product types. Comparison profiles only let you see consecutive one-year ACS estimates because you can't obtain accurate comparisons with 3 or 5 year overlapping estimates. I think this is just one of these examples where it's infinitely clear when you actually see it in action. So let's go back, and our geography is a county, right? It's Alameda. So we're going to tell it the type we want is a county. Of course, it's California. And once it populates, Alameda will be up there. And I'm going to throw that into your selections. So I'm interested in two things. I want year after year poverty rates. So I know it's poverty, and I know I want a comparison profile. So people clearly experience poverty. So I start there, and I expand poverty, and I throw poverty into my filter. So now I've just told the system I'm only interested in poverty in Alameda County. Now, I don't have to do this, but because I know I want a comparison profile, I'm going to stop over at product type and select comparison profile. So I'm telling it, I only want Alameda County property. Give it to me only as comparison profile. And I've conducted a pretty fine search because I only have 5 tables returned to me. And Alameda is clearly a big county, so I can only get 1 year estimates for comparison profiles because remember, you cannot compare 3 or 5 year consecutive 3 or 5 year estimates. So I'm going to open up the most current because I have 07 to 11 identified for me. And once it loads, this is basically the cousin of the DP03, the data profile 03. It's a basic table of economic characteristics, but this time in a comparison profile format. And I'm scrolling down pretty quickly, but you can see the trove of data available: income, income brackets, health insurance coverage. And here we arrive at poverty. And we arrive at our all families are at 9.6 for the year 2011. So what's great about this is at a glance, I can see what poverty looked like in the last several years in Alameda County. And more importantly, the Census Bureau makes it easy and tells me this is a 2010 to 2011 estimate. So it's pegged to 2011. Are these two differences statistically significant? And the Census Bureau, by the absence of an asterisk, is telling me no. It's not. Once you compute MOEs, there's no difference between the 2010 and the 2011 poverty estimate for all families. But then I go over to the 2009 poverty estimate, which is 7.3. And again, it's pegged at 11, right? And it's telling me, yes, the 09 estimate is statistically significant from the current 9.6% 2011 estimate, and so on. The 2008 estimate is statistically significant from the 11 estimate, and the 07 is as well. And this is where we can start looking also at poverty for different household compositions. So it's 9.6% currently for all families, but with related children under 18, it's significantly higher. and not so much so. That's generally the same rate for children under 5. It tends to be lower for married couples, but it spikes considerably for families with female householder, no husband present, and so on. And you can look at poverty for all people and these various compositions. So this helps you see that the rate is all people 13.1, but then you can see what the drivers of these rates are by looking at these various compositions. So the next exercise okay, so it's your turn. So hopefully you've had a good primer and you're ready to search for your own data. Your exercise is to compare poverty levels for all families in a primary county that you'll serve. So obviously all your answers are going to vary. And here again, I invite you to look at poverty for all people. It's going to be the same table format that I just showed you in that exercise, but this time you'll be after a DP03 instead of a CP03, although you can pick a CP if you wish. But the general instructions are as follows. If you look at number 3, go to Advanced Search and your topics overlay, select People and Poverty, and then close your topics. Then go to your Geography tab and select your county, and then close your Geographies overlay. I'll give you guys a couple of minutes. And I could see, excuse me, that Robin has just invited you to throw up your selections in chat. So feel free to do that. And of course, tell us your geography, your county. And tell us whether you're posting for all people or all families or female householders, related children under 18, etc. And this is significant. If your county is smaller and you can only get a 3-year estimate for it, tell us if you're not using a 1-year estimate, because otherwise we may all assume you're using a 1-year estimate. Okay, so I already see San Francisco has 8.5 for all families versus 13.8 for all people. And San Francisco is going to be one of those counties like D.C. that's going to have just enormous variances across the cities, similarly to Washington, D.C. Yeah, one of you has mentioned it disconnects the webinar, but it shouldn't have any bearing on the webinar. 30.2, I have Kevin telling me 30.2 for the female householder with related children. I don't know what county that is. And we have someone who's nesting already. That's great. Comparing the city of Oakland, a specific neighborhood, and Alameda County poverty rates. Fulton, New York has 13.0 for all families and 16.9. And here's an example from Jake of a 3-year estimate. So we have a number of you are going to be in counties where you can't get 1-year estimates probably. And now here we have one from Polk County, Iowa with a 5-year estimate. I wonder if there was not even a 3-year. I haven't run into that in Maryland yet, but that could well be a case for even smaller rural counties than I'm used to out here in Maryland. Oh, so you should start at census.gov. If it's not already clear, let me go to census.gov and web browser content. And go to the Data tab and click American FactFinder. It's the second option. And I'm hearing from people that they're surprised at what they're finding, which is great because a lot of people go into their communities kind of shooting from the hip or going off of memes, but a lot of times data will blow away assumptions that we all have about our communities that we know. It's not that we think we know them. We know them. We know them very well. We have our senses to experience them, but data obviously allows a more astute level of, I think, a lens to look at your community through. 21.6 for all families in Orleans Parish, and that's really high. And I have a 44.8 in Travis County. I wonder what kind of composition that is. That's astonishingly high. So a lot of you guys got the hang of that. I'm gonna move on in the interest of time, so I have time for your questions. So let's look at the next demo. So this is poverty across. So I've already helped you look at develop a better eye for looking at poverty and its different compositions of householders, and this time we're going to look at poverty across multiple ethnic groups. Poverty rates, so the question is, what are the poverty rates in Montgomery County for all people for the following Hispanic ethnic communities? And so they're Mexican, Guatemalan, Honduran, Nicaraguan, Salvadoran, and Colombian. Sometimes you may want to compare poverty rates or other indicators across these various ethnic and racial groups. When you're conducting your community needs assessments, you'll want to know how to develop programs for your stakeholders, and knowing about their backgrounds could help you do that. And it could also help you conduct more effective outreach. So before I begin, let me just point out again that there are a couple ways you can get race and ethnic data from American FactFinder. And I took a little time to kind of orient you so that you could see where you'd be spending most of your time in the search tools. Let me go back to advanced search. By the way, when you go back, avoid using this back arrow and use that back to advanced search bar. I'm going to clear all of these because I no longer need any of these filter items in my basket. So if you're just searching for the major race categories plus Hispanic identity, you don't even have to go to race and ethnic group tabs. You can go to people, and you can go to race and ethnicity. And you can pluck out what you want. Asian, here are your major categories: Asian, Black, Hispanic, or white. And white, not Hispanic means what it says, whites who are not Hispanic. But in this particular exercise, anything more detailed, such as example, where you're actually after not just Hispanic identity, but countries of origin, then you should go to that separate race and ethnic groups tab. So that's the purpose of this exercise, to show you why that tab is there and when you'll need it. So all I'm going to do here is just go to my Go box, my search box, and I'm going to type in each of these groups that I have. I'm going to start with Mexican. I'm going to hit Go. And so here it is. It's in my results table, and I'm going to click on Mexican. And make sure it ends up in this year's selection, guys. This is a mistake that I consistently make. Another mistake that you need to be aware of is this is a filter within a filter. You're going to have to delete Mexican before you search for your Guatemalan. And there's my Guatemalan. I'm going to hit Go. It's going to end up here, and I need to make sure it ends up there. And then I have to do the same for my Honduran. and I got nothing back, and that's because I didn't delete this. So that's why it's important you clear your last search when you're in the filter within a filter. So I've got my Honduran, and then I have my Nicaraguan. And I hit go. I have to delete my Honduran, take my Nicaraguan. This time I'll delete my Nicaraguan and look for my Salvadoran. And I'm taking advantage of that smart search feature that's anticipating what I'm looking for, although I don't have to. Colombian. Oops, and I forgot to delete Salvadoran. So here's my Colombian. So I'm done. I'm going to close out of this filter overlay. And I'll tell you right now that, I haven't picked a geography. So I said it was Montgomery County, Maryland. And why are these grayed out? Okay. I'm going to try to figure out why these are grayed out, and I have no idea. That's interesting. I'm going to just kind of take a stab at why they're grayed out by sometimes when the system does this, and it has never done this before, so we may have to abort this question right now. Yeah, this is not supposed to be happening. So let me delete Honduran, if that helps. Yeah, it's okay. So everything grayed out, unfortunately, and so I see what's happening. Okay, so we're just having a American FactFinder meltdown because my counties are not populating, and sometimes this happens with the system. That's all right. I think it's still a teaching moment because the system does this, and it's not you, it's the system. So let's go back to and see what our next question is, our next exercise. These would have been the results had the system been working. And we see the variances of poverty among the different Hispanics in Montgomery County, Maryland, and we see that the Salvadorans, we'd have to look at MOE's margins of error to be sure, but it looks like the Salvadorans and the Hondurans are experiencing poverty at a higher rate than the other communities, with the Guatemalans close behind. But we have to keep in mind we're looking at a 5-year estimate, and it's a 2006 to 2010 5-year estimate. And I apologize that the system's on the fritz. Let's hope it's not for your turn. This is your exercise, and then I think we can go into questions. I'm going to leave out that last exercise just in the interest of time and giving enough time for your questions. So select 3 counties within your service area this time and determine which has the highest poverty rate for blacks or African Americans. So this time you don't have to go to that race and ethnic group tabs. Remember, just go to topics, people, and after you select poverty, go to that race and ethnic group, ethnicity subtab, and select black or African American. Then you can close your topics overlay and select your counties, or select your counties first if you wish. And once you're there, I'm going to just make the task a little easier. This is going to be a detail table, one of those Bs that's on your cheat sheet, and you're going to look for B17020B. And many of you, though not all of you, may have to use a 3 or a 5-year estimate because there won't be enough blacks or African Americans sampled for the Census Bureau to release that data in a 1-year table for all of your communities. I'll just hang back and you guys can throw out your answers. Throw up your answers. Okay, I have someone who had no your race and ethnic group filters in your selections. So if you have no results that match your criteria, try a 3-year or a 5-year table. If you can't get it in a 1 year, go back to the main table results and try opening a 3 and a 5-year table. That's what's happening there. Okay, we have another one telling me that every time I click on the People tab, all options below it disappear. That's another AFF error. It just dims. If you hover over, do a mouse over and hover over those, the mouse over will tell you what they are.
Hi everyone. This is Shannon. I just wanted to connect. I see that we're approaching 3:15, and I just want to make sure that we're respecting everybody's time. I know that this is really an incredible presentation and webinar and an opportunity to dive in and get our hands dirty. So you're going to notice that we'll be opening a poll, and we encourage you to share your feedback. And Nasreen, I want to make sure that we cover all of the great content that you have, and then I'll let you figure out how best to move that forward.
Okay, I think at this juncture, so Shannon, they're going to have the option to download these slides, right?
Yes.
I'll go ahead and let you look at the last section. I'm going to skip an exercise, and your community profile section is just everything that is written here that I would just read for you. These are just tips for you to keep in mind when you're conducting your search. So please look them over before you start delving into your own searches and systematically, like developing. The takeaway from this is to develop a game plan for building your community profile and do so consciously and know what you're after and know how to get around little glitches in the system. For instance, some of you couldn't get data for 1-year estimates for blacks in your county, so go up to a 3 or a 5-year estimate. So those tips are all here. And I also left you with some useful tables that you'll often go back to time and again to get your poverty data. So they're all here listed for you. And I just want to open up the floor to questions since we are limited on time, if that's okay.
And Amy, if you can go ahead and let people know how to open up the phone lines.
Thank you.
Question?
If you'd like to ask a question on the telephone, please press star 1. Once again, that is star 1 to ask a question. One moment for the first question.
SNAP benefits by individuals.
Sorry, can I hear that in its completion?
Sorry, we've been having technical difficulties. Instead of going by household, can we get a percentage of people, the count for the number of people by census tract for SNAP, or is it only by census household?
It depends on how the data is presented in the tabulation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
we were only seeing census households and not individuals.
Yeah, if it's not giving you per capita, then that's all that's available in those tabulations.
Oh, okay.
Currently, there are no other questions.
Okay, there are no other questions. Okay.
Great. There's still an opportunity if you want to press star 1 and submit your questions. I'm going to ask a couple of questions from the Q&A that we have here. The first one is from Kevin Hill. Should we ignore data that isn't statistically significant?
Yeah, if you're ignore wouldn't be the right. It just means if you're using that CP table that the data is not. Yeah, it means that you cannot say that there has been an increase in poverty from 2010 to 2011. It means that you should understand how to interpret something that is not statistically significant.
Great. We have another question here. This came at the beginning of the webinar. The LA Times has a really good census data divided up by neighborhood here in LA. Unfortunately, they are still using the 2000 census data. Are there any other similar resources, or should we be doing this mapping ourselves?
The most current data available, no one's developed an app yet that it has the most current data available. So you still have to go to census.gov. The New York Times has something that is block by block of the city 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's 2005 to 2009 data sets, and so that's old by our standards now, but that's probably the next best resource in terms of excellent navigation and usability. I'll just show you that real quick. We got to Google. Here we are. So I just Googled New York Times census map. And again, this is not the most current. For the most current, you have to go to census.gov, but this is really easy. I'll just do my zip code. And also, it's not every indicator that we have. And apparently it doesn't always work either. So it makes me feel better that I'm not the only one with glitches. So it's select indicators, really nice mouse over, really nice census tract work, but not comprehensive and not current. Was that helpful?
Yes, I think that was helpful. Do we have any other questions that have come over the phones while we've answered a couple from the Q&A?
Once again, to ask a question, please press star 1. One moment, please.
Great, thank you. We have another question that came in the Q&A about the ancestry versus racial information. So does ancestry necessarily present racial information? So is there always a link between the two?
That's a complicated question. Ancestry is its own box and its own question. But because the race category, the major race categories, does not ask whites or blacks what their origins are, it's the only opportunity for you to see what the origins of your white and black community members are from census data. So hopefully that explains the relationship. You get the disaggregation from Asians and Hispanics from the major race questions we ask, and otherwise there would be no data on the ethnic origins of your whites and blacks without the inclusion of the ancestry question.
Thank you. We have one last question that's come into the Q&A, which might be a large question that we might have an entire webinar on and have. Why is poverty so hard to measure?
Okay, well, I should definitely start off by saying I'm not a poverty expert, and I've actually listened in on your webinar with your poverty expert. We are using a poverty definition that has been around since the Johnson administration. There are many social scientists who disagree with that definition, and the Census Bureau accordingly has begun using measuring something called the supplemental poverty measure. And the supplemental poverty measure upends the current poverty basket by including things that the current poverty measure does not, like SNAP benefits, because SNAP benefits alleviate poverty. But it also deducts things that make poverty worse, like expenses for child care and commuting to work and health care. The supplemental poverty measure is only available by state, and it is supplemental. It's not an official poverty measure. It's not used for the disbursement of funds for federal programs, but it is a response to the criticisms by social scientists. Another aspect of it that's pretty important in terms of the criticisms is the poverty income thresholds vary by geography, which is a huge criticism. But again, the supplemental is experimental. It's not law. I think it helps social scientists who are critical of the current measurement build their case for changing it. But like everything in our society, it will take time and probably some drum beating and case building for several years out. I hope that answered your question. But you can always go to census.gov and under the search field, type in supplemental poverty measure to learn more about it and to see what's measured in that basket versus the official poverty measure. That might be illuminating for you.
Great. Thanks so much, Nasreen. And we have another question. This one is specific to Ohio, although I think it could be applied anywhere. She was looking at the Ohio Department, make sure I'm getting the name right here. It's the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. They put out a monthly report on public assistance statistics and where those dollars are going. And she was wondering whether or not, the percentage of poverty would be different from the census, and so whether or not the criteria would be the same, and whether or not, how that was determined, and why there wouldn't necessarily be synergy between the two.
So is she saying that the poverty measures, the poverty rates are different?
I think that she's asking. When I'm looking at the report, I'm seeing that they're actually the same, but I just confirm with you.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say I'd be very surprised if they were different because the official poverty measure is in play for the disbursement of dollars. Like it or not, it's what we have, and it's what all the funding formulas are tied to. So the fact that they're the same is what I would expect to find. They should be.
Great, thank you. And another question that we had is whether or not anyone knows whether or not SNAP funding will be cut again in November, and if it helps poverty levels decrease, why cut it?
Oh, yeah, that's way beyond my purview. I apologize. I can't even touch that hot potato.
Wonderful. We are going to check in once more with the phones to make sure we didn't have any remaining questions there.
I do have new questions. The first question, the name is not recorded. If you had a question, your line is open. Please check your mute button. If you had a question, your line is open. Please check your mute button.
if we're interested in using shapefiles from Tigerline, would you prefer that we ask that at a separate time, or would it be appropriate for this conversation?
Oh, wow, we have a geographer in the house. Okay, I wasn't expecting a geographer. We better take that one offline because I don't have much geography acumen, and I would have to connect you with a geographer in my shop. So if you want to email me separately, I'll make sure I do that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sure.
Our next question comes from Jamie Hanahan. Your line is open.
Hi, I was wondering, do you know if the census contains information about public health, such as obesity rates, food deserts, domestic violence, epilepsy, different information like that?
The Census Bureau has collects data for a lot of federal agencies, but it's not census proprietary, I guess you could say. So I know that there's CDC collects obesity data. So my advice to you, and you mentioned obesity, and what else did you mention?
Food deserts, domestic violence, epilepsy, things like that.
So USDA has food desert data. CDC and some NIH have the other indicators that you mentioned. But to shortcut this whole process, my advice would be check out data.gov and then type in each of the indicators you're interested in, and you can get, that way you don't have to search each site separately, and you can get the various data that you're looking for from other federal agencies, because almost everything you mentioned another agency has. I know USDA has excellent.
What was that last suggestion, the last place to look for?
I'm sorry?
What was that last suggestion, the catch-all one that has all that data?
Oh, data.gov. So,
data.gov. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Currently, there are no other questions.
I might ask Anna's question.
Great. So there is one more question, and I can't actually see that one.
Great. So we were talking about large margins of errors, and Anna has a question. So some of the margin of error percentages are between the 8 to 12% mark. Would that make confidence intervals less than 95%, or does that make the information unusable?
Well, the Census Bureau, we have a true statistician in the room, uses, even though many statisticians prefer 95%, we peg at 90, so that's number one. And number two is the Census Bureau is extremely cautious. It won't weigh in on whether the data is unusable. It has taken the position, and I have to take that position too, that we will publish the margins of error, and you bring in the judgment.
Great. Well, thank you again, everyone, for participating. There have been a lot of really great questions and some good interaction. I'm just going to quickly going to walk through a couple of next steps so that you can keep the conversation going. Visit the American FactFinder and continuing to go through the steps on building your community profile, and we'll be sending out the copies of the slides from today's presentation so that you'll be able to see what those steps are and then begin to use that information to build your community profile. And then, work to use the data that you uncover to really inform the work and improve your project. And then we will continue to put additional resources, and there are already great resources on the Vista campus that can help you and support the work that you're doing. So be sure to log on and check out the pages for that. And then finally, we want to hear about the experiences and how you're using the census data to inform your work on the Vista forum. So keep us updated. And then, so thank you again for your participation. If you have any further questions or if you'd like more information, you can always contact us at vistawebinars@cncs.gov, or cns.gov, excuse me. And then we invite you to join us on June 12th at 2 p.m. for the Power of Service, Mobilizing Volunteers. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you back soon.
Thank you for your participation. You may disconnect at this time.